This is Caroline from Caroline's Adventure. We all face challenges in our lives. How do some people take those challenges and turn them into powerful results? Join me as we dig into a story on resilience, hope, and joy, and uncover lessons we can each use in our own lives. But before we start, please take a moment to show that 5-star rating button some love, and follow while you're there to be updated every time I release a new episode. Now, before we begin, a word of caution. On this podcast, we regularly discuss topics like sexual assault, suicide, and addiction, which may be disturbing to some. Please take care as you listen. And if you need support in the United States, reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741. Thank you so much, Whitney Allen Gadecki. Whitney's joining us today with one of those amazing stories that reminds you of how tenuous life can be, but also how you can take the depths of pain and make something so incredibly powerful and beautiful from it. Thank you, Whitney, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
You're welcome. I like to let you start wherever it feels right to tell us your story.
So to set the scene for everyone, on October 14th, 2021, I was 26 weeks pregnant with our second son. My husband, Ryan, was a canine officer in a suburb of Philadelphia. I was working as a medical malpractice defense attorney. We had a 3.5-year-old. Ryan went to the gym. On his way home, got stung by a bee on one of his arms. And then at home, he had an anaphylaxis reaction to the bee sting. He went into cardiac arrest, which caused a very severe anoxic brain injury. He was deprived of oxygen for about 20 minutes, but they were able to revive him. So that kind of started the clock on a 5 to 6 month period where we were trying to see if recovery was possible, but he was in a coma and then in a vegetative state. When we were told he couldn't recover from his injuries because the extent of the brain damage was just too much and he wouldn't lead a meaningful life, myself and his family decided to put him on hospice, and he passed away in April of 2022.
It's wild how life takes these turns and you never know when it's going to hit or how it's going to hit. And it knocks you off at the knees. One of the things that I saw you talk about on social media was that you've seen the darkest parts of yourself and you've been down into the depths of who you are. That resonated so deeply with me because I've had several instances in life. My father, when I was, I believe, 13, was hit by a drunk driver while he was on a motorcycle and ended up with a heavy brain injury. And we were told that he would not survive. He ended up surviving, but was dramatically different.
Yeah.
And at 13, you don't expect these kinds of changes to happen.
No.
And then when my son was 8 months old, I was hit by a car and ended up with my own TBI.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was one of those things where your story really resonated with me because we have these moments in life where things seem so normal. And then it's just a tiny little blip in the roadway, and suddenly you're off on a completely different path. It sounds like it has made a dramatic shift in your life. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. First of all, thank you for sharing your traumas and everything you've been through. You're absolutely right. You go about your life and things happen to other people, and in the back of your mind, you're sympathetic. You're like, oh, that's really sad, or oh my gosh, can even make you cry, right? But it feels so far away from you. And in some ways, when you haven't been through a life-altering event, you feel untouchable. It's something I never thought was my story. And you've just put it out of your head, even though Ryan was a police officer, and obviously his work wasn't the safest job in the world. I was like, he's always going to come home, right? Because if you don't think like that, you just live in this state of fear and anxiety, which takes away from life. And then for him not to be injured or killed in the line of duty, but something so random and so unexpected, it just makes you feel fragile and vulnerable. Like all of these precious people in my life can be taken away so fast, and it feels really scary.
I don't know about you. I went through a phase where I started trying to mitigate every possibility because you're like, oh my goodness, this could happen. And the amount of strength that it takes to pull yourself back and be like, it could
Mhm.
happen.
Yeah.
And whether I worry about it or not, it's not going to prevent things from happening, but it is going to prevent me from living a better life and making the most of this life that I do have.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that really resonated with me when I was looking through your story was that you've taken this and you are sharing and you are being open and real and you are saying, you know what, I've had this amazing pain happen, but it doesn't mean that I owe anybody access to that. This is my pain and I don't know anybody. When I saw that, I was like, that is such a really important thing because you have people that are flocking to the trauma and you don't have to give access to that.
That's a really powerful thing about social media, and that's why I started talking about grief is because I realized, having gone through it and becoming a widow, that I was not prepared. Like the movies, people are sad when someone dies, but I quickly realized sadness and despair, it's like a big part of it, but there's so many other parts of it that are very complicated and complex, and not a lot of people are talking about that. I wanted to talk about the experience so other people could not feel so alone. Because
Yeah.
there's not a lot of people that are talking about the things that we talk about in whispers with other people or that you have to go through alone. So I wanted to bring the more taboo subjects of grief because I think it's really important.
That's so true. And grief hits in the moments that you least expect it to. You think you've reached the depths, and then there's another layer. And then you think you've reached the depths of that, and then there's another layer. What do you think are the taboo parts? What are the pieces that we should talk more about?
Love that question. I think the number one thing that comes to mind for me is just the duality of grief, how you can feel really sad, but then you can also feel a lot of joy. It's feeling a lot of different things at once. And I think when you haven't experienced grief after loss of somebody you love, you don't understand that these two or more things can coexist at one time. You can't really conceptualize that in your brain. You can have great joy and be in really great pain all at the same time. I had a baby when Ryan was in the hospital in a vegetative state. There was so much pain involved with that because he wasn't there. And I didn't really know if he'd ever come back and be who he was. And then I'm having this baby, and that's such a great joy, right? And we're human, we're not simple people. We can experience more than one thing at one time. So that's something that comes to mind. And being a young widow, I think there are things that are unique to that experience, like falling in love again and getting married again. And there's so much criticism toward that experience because people don't understand you can have so much love for somebody that's not physically here anymore and then cultivate a really beautiful relationship with somebody else who is here physically and can be your partner through life after the death of a partner. And I don't know, I feel like people just are like, "Okay, you can't love 2 people at one time," and it's not that simple.
Yeah,
Uh
you look at children.
Right.
You love your children, you love your family. We have such rigid constructs in society. But the challenge is everyone's got a different rigid construct.
Yeah.
And so the second you fit into this one, you are wildly outside of the scope of this one. If people are like, oh no, you're doing this wrong.
Yeah.
And so if you try to fit into any of them, you lose the sight of who you are and what's the right path for you. And it's alienating, but ultimately you have to say, you know, no, this is who I am. And it may be fluid. And just because this part of my life is no longer does not mean that all these other components don't go forward and that I don't have a right to exist and be the best version of me, even though this part is done. I give you so much credit because that takes so much strength, but also to do it openly is so strong.
Thank you. It's not easy to forge your own path and do what you feel is right for you and your children and your future. And then understand that there are going to be people that say the worst things possible to you. And that despite all that, it's still right for you. I talk to widows all the time and I get asked, how do you become so confident and how do you move forward in a way that feels authentic to you when other people are being really critical and passing judgment and basically cutting off ties? And these are family members, close friends. These are really huge secondary losses after a death. And it matters. It's so painful. But also, if you start your life based on how people in your life want you to live or what they feel like is right for you, at that point, you're not living your own life. You're living somebody else's. And those people aren't coming home to your life, right? I look at all the people that I no longer have relationships with because I guess they didn't approve of me moving forward or what I do now, even like for work, which is fine because ultimately they weren't coming home to an empty house and having to sleep in a bed where this other person was with you for a decade or more and feeling that sorrow and having to parent by yourself. And they're not the ones doing all the day to day things, yet they're passing judgment. I'm like, you literally are doing nothing to help, but you're willing to pass judgment. What kind of high horse is that? It's ridiculous at that point.
It's interesting because having done as many of these interviews as I've done, one of the things that I keep hearing over and over again is that anytime some part of your life dies or shifts significantly, and you have to shift into a new version of yourself, you end up losing large amounts of the people around you. I was talking with a guy a couple weeks ago who ended up paralyzed and he ended up regaining his ability to move, but he lost all of his support network, all his friends, everybody in the process of the paralysis. I know when I had my TBI, I lost my two closest girlfriends. We called each other sisters. I thought we would be friends for the rest of our lives. But when you shift, when you move into a different version of yourself, you no longer fit into that need the people in your world have for you. And it's heartbreaking, but it's also freeing to be like, you know what? It's not me. It's that they no longer fit into who it is I'm becoming. I'm growing and I'm evolving and I'm shifting into something new.
Yeah.
And they no longer fit with that. And that's another part of the grieving process. Not only are you grieving the loss, whether it's a person or it's a lifestyle or whatever it is that you've lost, you've also lost the future that you saw for that path because you've got a whole different trajectory, but you've also lost whatever connections were tied to that. And
Yeah.
that's a whole other grieving process that I wasn't prepared for. And I don't think most people are.
No, that was particularly shocking to me because when you're going through hell and back, there's no other way
Yeah.
to explain that. Like the deepest, darkest versions of yourself. And then you're brave enough and you gain the strength to find some sort of happiness or semblance of normalcy. And then people in your circle are like, oh, you shouldn't be happy. Or who are you to try this new thing or whatever it is? But I'm just trying to find what works for me now in this completely new identity, this completely new world without this person that was so integral to my life. Like, why can't you just leave me alone and let me be happy? Why can't you support me? Why is it so hard? Why is my happiness a trigger to you?
Yes, I was tearing up as you were talking about that because I can remember saying to my two closest girlfriends, I just need you to love me. I don't need you to understand. I don't need you to accept it. I just need you to love me because I've loved you through challenges and I just need you to support and love me, whether you understand it or not. And you hit on something really important there, which is there's probably a lot of very unhappy people in the world that continue their current path because it is what they believe is expected of them. And when they see you making a break from that, because life has done something to force you down this new path, but rather than despairing in who you were, you're like, you know what? I'm going to figure out what happiness means now. And I think that's really hard for people that have chosen a smaller life.
your growth, your ability to overcome, how brave you are, how strong you are, all of these things, I think, activate in other people. Oh, why aren't I more like that? Why can't I cultivate that in my own life? I think there's a level of jealousy. I think there's a level of self actualization. Like, how dare her do this? Why can't I do that in my own life? But they don't really want to admit that to themselves. They just want to judge.
Yeah.
It's really hard because these are people you never thought would turn their backs on you during a really hard time of your life. And unfortunately, because I've been working with widows and grievers for 3 years plus now, it really seems like it's the rule, not the exception.
Yeah.
And whenever I have a client that says to me, oh, the people in my circle are so supportive, I'm like, that is such a beautiful thing because it's really rare.
That is so true. And it's sad that we're not better at being there for one another through these things, because these events have happened since the beginning of humanity. People go through loss, people go through damage, people go through injury. It's very alienating. As you said, I had to learn a completely different version of myself. I thought I had a firm foundation on who I was and what I was capable of. And then all of that was stripped away.
Yeah.
And similar to you, I had to learn myself all over again. And that was alienating because I thought I knew who I was. And suddenly all the pieces of myself that I relied upon no longer worked.
Yeah.
It is a shame that we as a society aren't better about pulling around people when they're going through those tough times.
Yeah. It's like they're really good at showing up when you're down and broken, but when you actually start climbing out of this deep dark hole, I think that's when the uncomfortable ability comes in because then you're rising above and that makes so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
In grief, there's a different aspect because when you're moving on in your life and let's say you find love again, or even if you're just able to find some sort of happiness again, whatever that looks like, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It can really activate grief in other people that are in your circle because for them, it's, oh, that's a reminder that this person's able to create this whole other life without my friend, my son, my brother, my nephew, right? So for them, it's so triggering and activating to their grief because the person that was tied the most with the person that's dead, you are like symbolic of that. And they want you to stay the same because if you stay the same, it's not an activation for their grief.
Wow. Yeah. And it's probably also really challenging because they need some kind of touchstone of what that old world was.
Yeah.
And seeing you shift is just a reminder that, hey, there is no going back to that. One of the things that you talked about on your page, you said it's tough to have those moments where you expect to see that person in the crowd or at places you just instinctively expect to see them, and not seeing them is a reminder all over again that you're never going to see them there. And I would bet that for them, seeing you move on and have a life still is another reminder of this person being gone, in addition to the fact that they're no longer at the holiday parties or at the birthdays. Seeing you shift into something new is an even deeper resonation of that.
If you stay the same and you're just showing up with yourself or with your kids, their brains aren't rewiring for a different reality. That's, oh, he could be at work, right?
Yeah.
Because your brain, when you have a very deep connection with another human being, your brain is wired to be predictive. So that is why it's so painful when someone dies because our brains are so wired to predict that somebody is going to come home at a certain time or call us at a certain time or take out the trash on Thursdays, like whatever it is. So when that doesn't happen because they're not here anymore, your brain is, oh, like this isn't right. I need to find them in the world and they're not in the world anymore and they can't return to you. So you have to completely rewire your brain around something that's already hardwired. And that's why in the beginning, it's so painful and that longing is so intense because your brain is literally trying to find this other person in the world and it's impossible.
And I would imagine going through that as a mom,
Yeah.
and because you've got a 3-year-old that remembered his father, but then you've got an infant. Did he ever even get to meet?
So yes and no, because he was like a newborn. So he met Ryan when he was in brain rehab, but he never came out of the vegetative state, so he couldn't interact. Like, we put him on his lap. I have videos, I have photos because I want to be able to show my son Leo, you met your dad. But there's obviously the substance isn't there like it was with my older son.
I can't even imagine going through that. Having an infant, having a toddler that's his entire world is turned upside down, but he doesn't yet have the cognitive awareness to be like, okay, here's what's going on. And trying to be with your husband through this process. Like, you are amazing.
Thank you. And also it was like, I think back on it now and it was so messy. I get asked all the time, how were you able to do that? And you're in such survival mode. You're super focused. You're very unemotional, right? Because your brain's so protective of you. You're able to do all of the things in a very numb state because you're just going throughout the motions to be able to survive. And that is the only way I can describe it. Like, my body and mind were very protective of me. And that's the only way I survived.
Eleanor Roosevelt said, women are like tea bags. You don't know how strong they are until they get into hot water. And it is so true. I look back both at my father's accident and my own, and I don't want to say that I'm grateful for them because I'm not. I don't know that I would have chosen either of those to ever happen to my life.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, I know myself so well. And I say all the time, I'm 1,000,000 feet tall and bulletproof. I was hit by a car. I picked myself back up. I had an infant and a toddler. I made it work, even though I had to relearn how to walk. I know at this point in time that as long as my heart is beating, my brain is functioning, I can pretty much survive anything. I don't want to, but I know what I am capable of now. You went through this incredibly challenging time, and I'm sure it still is incredibly challenging in different ways, but it also gives you such a profound relationship with yourself. And it's interesting because being a woman on social media and a podcaster, you do get trolls. You do get people who are like, let me tell you about yourself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all the time.
And it's never easy. I won't say it's easy.
No.
But it is nice to have this awareness of myself. Be like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's sad for me that you're so caught up in your own misery that you want to take me down, but you're wrong. I'm like, next.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the comments. People are like, when you put your life out here and you're a public figure, then you have to take it as no, actually, I didn't ask for this just because I'm sharing my grief journey. Like, I'm actually just trying to help people. That doesn't mean I'm deserving of hate. Just as if I'm walking around in the world, I'm not deserving of people coming up to me and spewing hate at me. It's the same, like, social media is just, it's more of a connection point to more people. But you wouldn't expect just to go out into the world and have people come up to you and tell you all the things like that people leave on your posts and whatever. It has taken a long time to get to the place where I really don't care. It doesn't ruin my day anymore. And the way I've been able to reframe, because so much of grief is reframing things. It's not changing reality, but it's reframing the situation. So, to be more kind to yourself and to tend to yourself. When I see something, I'm like, how can I make this into an educational thing about grief? Like, societal expectations or what people think about grief. How can I make this into a talking point to educate other people about this experience? So that's how I reframed trolls. I'm like, oh, that's actually interesting. This person said that. Let me address how this relates to the grief experience and people's expectations or what people think about grief and how it's flawed.
That's awesome because it gives you an opportunity to take it and use it for your own power. And I love that you use this as an opportunity for growth and for education to control the narrative. Putting my story out on social media or doing podcasts, I found incredibly liberating because we hide so much pain and difficulty in life. Yeah. Back to your earlier point, we don't really openly express when things are hard. And I found it incredibly liberating to be like, yeah, here are my struggles. Here's the things that I'm challenged with. And to hear from other people that they were struggling as well. I found it very validating, but also freeing to know that I wasn't the only one that had ever had this experience and that other people found ways through it. And so putting our stories out there isn't about, gee, I'm looking for critiques on how I'm making it through my day to day, but more about the people that are in the depths of it. Here's a story of how I got through it, and you can get through it too.
You want to get your message out there because you want it to reach the people that it needs to reach. People really do need to hear stories like mine and stories like yours because people need the North Star, right? If they're in a really bad place and seeing that other people got themselves out of depression or grief or whatever it is, people need those stories because they need to know it's possible for them. If somebody else can do it, I can do it too. Because once you have that hope, that changes everything. I always say I've been able to help so many people in my one-on-ones working with clients, but the people that are completely hopeless and they're not willing to try or experiment or help themselves, I can't help them. They have to get to the point where they at least have hope that it can get better, even if they don't know what that looks like.
You've got a large follower base, which shows how many people are looking for that kind of guidance. They are the ones that your message is for. Your message isn't for trolls, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing I've had to make peace with is that you've got to be pretty miserable in your own life to attack random strangers on the internet. That is not someone whose life is amazing and doing great.
Right. Yeah. I honestly feel bad for those people that must be having such a hard time internally for them to project such a terrible thing to somebody else.
Yeah. And it is sad because rather than hearing the message and looking for how to be better within themselves, they're like, oh, I've got to tear this person down. As opposed to, oh, they
Mhm.
found a way through it. Maybe there's something here for me.
Yeah, exactly. Although I do try to read comments because a lot of them are positive and I'm a business owner. So I want to make sure that if somebody's looking for a link, I send it to them. So it's hard to miss the bad comments because to read the good comments, you're going to have to read the bad comments. But after 3+ years of doing this, I feel you do get used to it. It's terrible to say that, but it's your confidence that shifts as well.
Absolutely. I look at the me that I am now versus the me that I was before my accident, and I am so grateful for the me that I am now. I am so grateful for a lot of the unhealthy coping mechanisms that I had going into my accident. Something that I also talk about is that I grew up in a household of abuse and neglect. I had all these coping mechanisms to create this perfect bubble of a life.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was happy because I was doing way better than I was as a child,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't realize how precariously it was all balanced and how hard I was working to maintain that until I had a TBI and all of my executive coping mechanisms were gone.
Yeah.
And I realized how much effort was going into maintaining that. So I'm grateful for where I am now because at this point, I'm like, I put it all out there. I put the messy parts of life out there, both in social media, but also in life in general, because I feel that the most beneficial thing that we can do for other people is to be real in who we are and to show the truth of who we are because there are so many people hiding behind masks and that doesn't help anybody. That
Yeah.
that doesn't serve anybody. But when you're open and raw and real with who you are and the struggles you've come through, as you show, it puts a hand back to others who are going through or getting ready to go through a similar challenge and says to them, as you said, here's a North Star. There is a way through this. There is a path that you can follow. You're going to come out the other side of this.
Yeah. I heard once, what was it? It's if you're making content to please everyone, like you're reaching no one.
Yeah.
Because if you are being your authentic self, like you're going to repel people. That's just like the natural course of things because when you do show up as your authentic self, like people aren't going to like you. But
Yeah.
if everybody likes you, then you're definitely not showing up as your authentic self because that's just not how life is. That's just not how it works. There's going to be people that like love you, that are your ride or die when you show up like authentically. And then there's going to be people that hate you because of who you are. But then you know you're doing it right because you need both. I feel like I need to check in with myself sometimes. I'm like, is my content becoming almost too vanilla because I am maybe straying away from the hard topics because I'm afraid of like all the bad comments or whatever?
Yeah.
And what do I need to talk about that's really hard that might be controversial, but actually is really important to talk about?
And sometimes you do get into a rut because it gets exhausting.
Yeah, it does.
I find that I ebb and flow with how deep I'm digging in on things because sometimes I do want to just post silly, simple things that are a little bit more surface. And then the other day, I had a weird flashback from the trauma I had as a child. And I ended up posting about it. And at first, I was like, okay, is this something I even want to put out there?
Yeah.
But I was really struggling with it.
Uh-huh.
And I posted, and it was so validating to get so much support.
Yeah.
And I got some crappy comments, but it was nice to have a place to put it out there and just to show it to the light of day and be like, boom,
Mhm.
I'm processing it by putting it out there. And it's always cool to get the comments back from people who are like, yes, I've had a similar experience. Thank you so much for speaking on this. This helped me put my own situation into frame.
And I also think when you get started as a content creator, you're mostly making the content for yourself. I could have never comprehended that just putting my grief journey online would become what it's become, just talking about my everyday life and my grief process. I started because it was therapeutic for me. It was cathartic to talk about these things. And it wasn't for validation. It was like I just needed a place to put it. And instead of putting in like a journal, I just put it online and not thinking anyone would read it because I had maybe 300 followers. So no one read my stuff. And because also it's being artistic, creating content is artistic. And that's something that's really helpful in grief. Having the music and like the pictures, like that was really, it made me emotional, but it really helped me process a lot of what I was going through. And I would just put it out there because it was helpful to me. And I remember one of my reels I started just getting like a lot of followers. I'm like, oh my, what is this? Because you're not used to like having all the notifications come off because you're just like, you have your mom being like, love you and stuff. But then,
Yeah.
oh, other people are actually interested in what I'm putting out in the world. And it's like it's such a bizarre phenomenon when that starts happening.
It truly is. It's funny because I started for almost the exact same reason. When I had my accident, I lost chunks of my memories. And I just wanted some place to store memories in case it ever happened again. My father lost huge amounts of memories after his accident. That was one of the things that I remembered, as confused as he was from his brain injury. One of the things that was most disconcerting to him was he couldn't trust his memories any longer. And so when I had my accident, it was the same thing. And I was like, okay, I want somewhere where I can stick a daily journal so I can go back and I have a cookie crumb trail just in case this ever happens again. I honestly never expected anyone else to ever look at it. It was
Yeah.
for me. And it
Uh-huh.
still is for me. I get people who are like, you should post this, you should post more of this. And I'm like, I post whatever is in my heart on a given day.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's raunchy. It's whatever it is that's in my heart and in my mind in a given moment. And I don't know about you, but it's wild to have people actually resonate with it, but it's also fun. It's fun to know that my messy lived experience unifies other people in their own messy lived human experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love content creation because it's your creative side. Before I became a lawyer, I went to school for journalism and writing. So I'm like, I was always like a writer at heart. And then I was like, oh, this isn't really practical. Like, how do you support yourself? I'm like, oh, I'll just go to law school because my dad is a lawyer. I'm like, that's a predictable, stable career. And it is. It's a great career. But it's just so crazy, obviously, like how life happens. I get to really express myself through putting this writing out there for others to read. And it is amazing when other people say, I'm going through this experience and I wasn't able to articulate what I was going through, but you put like the perfect words to the situation. Because sometimes the hardest thing is really articulating, like, what is the experience that I am going through? I especially think in grief, it's really hard to articulate, like, what does this feeling feel like? And I try to use analogies. I wrote a post recently that having your person die is like a homesickness that you can't come home and feel better. It's like you're just constantly, that feeling for home is like that longing. And people really resonate with that because they're like, it's hard to put a finger on what this feeling is.
And grief is such a complicated process that just knowing you're not alone in it can be so valuable. To know that other people have gone through this and they've survived it. And not only have they gone through it, but they have words for it and a frame for it that helps me say, okay, you know what? This isn't an endpoint. Because I know that in the depths of both my father's accident and my own, you get to points where you think, is this going to be what the rest of my life is?
Yeah.
Am I ever going to move past this? Or is this just who I am now? And it's amazing to see people who have come through it. I loved your North Star analogy, but there is a path through it and there is a path forward.
Yeah. And I also think it's very powerful when you're able to take yourself out of the equation and be like, it's not all about me all the time. Like your pain and your grief and like what you're going through, you become so egocentrical. It's just about, oh, my little space and my world and like my thoughts. But it's like, there are so many people suffering. You're not the only one suffering. For me, it's like, I'm not the only one that has lost their husband. I'm not the only one that has gone through grief. And that's why helping other people through their worst days and their grief, it helps me so much because I'm not in my story all the time. And I think that's really important. Like, you have to get outside of yourself.
The easiest way to get through a hard time is to focus on someone else and helping them move forward and give back. Instead of how do I survive it, but how do I help someone else? It's so empowering. It's so empowering to shift that lens onto helping others. And not only is it empowering to you, but it's also so gratifying when you see you're helping them.
What I do is very related to my grief and what's happened to me. But even if you're just going through grief and you volunteer at a soup kitchen or a hospital, like whatever it is, that is still so helpful and healing because you realize, oh, it isn't all about me all the time. I'm putting my energy, even pain, into something else that's greater than myself. And then also in grief, we really do feel like we lose purpose, we lose motivation, we lose a sense of self. So doing something else for somebody else gives us purpose again.
That purpose is such a point of hope. It flames in you that appreciation. And it also helps to remind you that, you know what, as tough as whatever it is I'm going through, there are people that are dealing with something much more difficult. And it helps you reframe the fact that, okay, this isn't the path that I would have chosen, but here are the things that I do have in my favor. And the only thing I can control is where I go from here.
That's why I stress the importance of intentional actions because in grief, you really do feel untethered. You just feel like very lost, like you're just floating through life and not really with any purpose or control. So being able to ground yourself in intentional actions like going for a walk or reading 10 pages of a book or meditating or drawing or listening to music or having routines and rituals, it just grounds you to reality. It's very healing. It makes you feel like, okay, my world, although I can't control everything, there are a lot of things I can control. And this is what I'm going to focus on. And it creates that tethering and that grounding that people really need in grief.
This has been amazing.
Oh, I'm glad.
Thank you for this.
Yeah.
And thank you for what you're doing to help others, because clearly the message you've got is really resonating with people. And you really are genuinely helping people move forward through grief. Do you have a last thought that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, if you are struggling, whether it's grief or some other life struggle, no matter what, there are always steps forward that you can take. You do have more control than you think right now. Focus on those intentional actions every day that give you hope, that keep you grounded, that keep you tethered, because your thoughts and your actions create your life, and those things matter. You can be on this perpetual hamster wheel of the same thoughts and the same actions, and those can keep you stuck. But there's always a way out of that hamster wheel. But you have to be the one to do that. There's not going to be anybody else that saves you.
I love that because you're right. You're
Yeah.
the only one who controls where you go from here.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, Whitney. This was amazing. You've given me a lot to think about. I loved your message of just reframing what it is that you're going through to find a path that works for you. We will put links to your website and your book on the show notes, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Caroline's Adventure podcast. While you're here, subscribe to the show so you're the first to catch new episodes when they're released. And if you enjoyed hanging out with me today, please leave a 5-star rating. For links to social media and more content, visit the description for this episode or go to carolinesadventure.com. That's Caroline with 2 A's, adventure.com.